On behalf of Bridgewater State University and the Martin Richard Institute for Social Justice, I'm so pleased to welcome you to today's conversation with Suffolk County District Attorney Rachel Rollins. Thank you for being with us today, and we are delighted to be sponsoring today's conversation. I want to thank our co-sponsors, actually, BSU's Department of Criminal Justice and the African American Studies minor at BSU. We deeply value our collaborations, and we thank our colleagues for helping to shape today's thoughtful program. A special thank you to our moderators, Dr. Mia Ortiz and Zahara Townsend. We'll hear from them in a moment. A special thank you to Vinnie DiMacedo, the team at the MRISJ, particularly Laura Mulvey and Jen Thibodeau. I'd like to thank Kelsey Gauthier and Kathy Walker, and many thanks to Patrick Scherns and Renee Algarini from the DA's office. I'm delighted today to be joined by so many colleagues and friends from across the university and the community. Delighted that we have our Provost Karim Ismaili with us, members of the MRISJ Advisory Board, including Carolyn Casey and Bill and Denise Richards. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, District Attorney Rollins, for being with us today to share your journey into public service and the critical leadership role you hold in our community. Your pursuit to effect meaningful, lasting criminal justice reform is more important than ever, and your leadership to ensure that we are building and sustaining equitable and just communities is inspiring. Last summer, following the murder of George Floyd, BSU President Fred Clark created a special task force to examine the policies and practices and cultures that are impeding racial equity at BSU. We listened to the voices of our students, and our goal has been to identify remedies and recommendations for corrective action. The task force is close to finalizing a report for the president, and we have now been doing this against the backdrop of the trial of Derek Chauvin. This week, we all collectively held our breath as we waited for the verdict. Chauvin was found guilty on all charges, and the Floyd family had, we hope and pray, a moment of justice following almost a year of incredible suffering and loss with the murder of George Floyd. Following our collective exhale, there remains much work to be done across our campus, communities, and our Commonwealth and our country to ensure that we are indeed building a movement of justice and not just a moment of gratitude for an outcome that should never have been in doubt. We are grateful for this important and timely conversation that we're about to have with District Attorney Rachel Rollins. DA Rollins, your journey as a tireless public servant and a passionate leader for criminal justice reform and equitable, inclusive, safe, and healthy communities is encouraging and inspiring. This is also a pivotal time for the city of Boston. Kim Janey is the first woman to serve as mayor and the first person of color, and the upcoming election promises to be one of the most diverse. It's an exciting time and an important time, and we owe you, DA Rollins, a thanks for helping to shatter the glass ceiling of who gets elected and who gets to represent us. I'm delighted to see so many members of our BS community join us for this vital discussion. We'll have an opportunity to hear from the DA, and then Dr. Ortiz and Zahara will moderate a conversation, and we will be working from the questions that you submitted in advance. I'm pleased to introduce our two moderators, Dr. Mia Ortiz. Dr. Mia Ortiz is an associate professor and internship coordinator in the Criminal Justice Department at BSU, and she's currently serving as the interim director of the African American Studies minor. Her research specialties include juvenile delinquency, race and crime, punitiveness in schooling, and specialized courts. Dr. Ortiz's work has been widely published, including in the Journal of Experimental Criminology, Journal of Drug Use, and Journal of Ethnicity and Criminal Justice. And she is routinely called upon to review criminal justice departments, grant applications, and scholarly publications. Dr. Ortiz is a proud member of the Racial Democracy, Crime, and Justice Network via the Ohio State and Rutgers universities. She holds a master's degree in education from San Francisco State University and a doctorate in criminal justice from the Graduate Center at the City University of New York, John Jay College. Zahara Townsend is a member of the 2020 graduating class. We're proud of you, Zahara. Congratulations. She's also a member of the Psi Alpha Psi Honor Society, and she'll be graduating with a degree in social work. Zahara is a racial justice fellow with the Martin Richard Institute of Social Justice. As a justice fellow, she works with the nonprofit organization Raising Multicultural Kids, where she works to cultivate racial and cultural competence in a predominantly white community. Zahara has served on the Racial Justice Task Force on campus, where she's assisted in gathering data and developing recommendations on how the university can incorporate anti-racist and decolonial efforts into curricula and co-curricular experiences. Zahara is passionate about racial justice and promoting an equitable society. In the future, she will work to change policies that address mass incarceration and support nonprofits who assist people previously incarcerated and help to reduce recidivism rates. I'm pleased and delighted to turn the program over to Zahara. Thank you all for joining us. Zahara, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Grant. I am so honored to have the privilege to introduce Suffolk County District Attorney Rachel Rollins to be our first guest speaker at the Martin Richard Institute for Social Justice Civic Speaker Series. District Attorney Rollins, welcome to Bridgewater State University. Suffolk County District Attorney Rachel Rollins is the Chief Law Enforcement Officer for Boston, Chelsea, Revere, and Winthrop, Massachusetts. She is the first woman ever elected as District Attorney of Suffolk County and the first woman of color ever elected as District Attorney in Massachusetts. We could not have hoped for a more deserving elected official as the MRISJ launches this series in these critical times. Since taking office in 2019, the DA has implemented humane and data-supported policies that no longer criminalize mental health issues, substance use disorders, food and housing insecurities, and immigration status. Instead, focusing her limited resources on the violent and serious crimes and keeping Suffolk County safe. Among some of her larger initiatives and policy implementations are her first in the nation discharge integrity team to help investigate officer-involved shootings and allegations of excessive force. DA Rollins has also created an integrity review bureau that looks not only at post-conviction claims of actual innocence, but also reviews unconstitutional, unethical, and unjust convictions, as well as sentencing disparities. Over 240 years of wrongful convictions and counting have been overturned by her IRB. The public service experience that DA Rollins brings to our Massachusetts community, combined with her work as an attorney for over 20 years, is vital now more than ever, considering the heightened visibility of the relationship between law enforcement and the communities that they serve. It means so much to me to have Rachel Rollins here because it is rare that I'm privileged to see a Black woman in such a high position of power. DA Rollins is opening doors and paving ways for Black women like myself, which means so much to me. In my social work classes, we learn about the disproportionate laws and that oppress marginalized individuals. And I'm looking forward to hearing what the district attorney shares about her thoughts and views on how the criminal justice system works and her ideas moving forward. As a future social worker, I plan to work on a macro level, developing and implementing policies that make a positive change on state, community, and national levels. To my fellow students, this conversation is an example of connecting with a local elected official, one strategy that you can use to impact social change. We hope that you all take advantage of reaching out to your elected officials who represent you in local government and discuss what matters most to you and your community. DA Rollins, we thank you for sharing your insights and expertise for your public service and leadership in the criminal justice reform. And thank you again for joining us tonight for this important conversation. Now, I am very excited to invite District Attorney Rollins to share a few words with us about her journey becoming DA, her leadership role in Suffolk County, and her perspective of the difference between justice and accountability.
Thank you so much, Zahara, Mia, and Mary. I'm very excited to be here. I did present some remarks, so I'm going to hopefully get through these quickly so we can get to questions, but I did put some thought into this. So I am really honored to be with all of you today and to have an important discussion. I really believe conversations are important to implement change, but they're only the beginning. We need action. Earlier this week, we saw it. Derek Chauvin was found guilty for the murder of George Floyd. But this trial was incredibly painful to watch for some of us. This death was awful. It's difficult to read about even. And quite frankly, the fear I felt prior to the verdict coming speaks volumes with respect to certain communities and how little we expect from the criminal legal system. I want people to realize that every time a Black person is murdered because of an interaction with the police, that start with a nonviolent misdemeanor, the passing of a counterfeit $20 bill, selling loose cigarettes, or driving with an air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror, we should all feel that. There is interconnected trauma that is compounded with every new video we watch, every new trial there is. And I want you to know that these lives weren't lost, they were stolen. The road to equity is long and uneven, but there was accountability, at least for George Floyd. But I want to be very clear. A guilty verdict is not what George Floyd's family wants. They want George to be alive today. A guilty verdict is not what the Black community wants. We want our lives not to be the subject of debate and deliberation. What we all want is an end to police brutality and racial injustice. We want our lives to matter, for our bodies not to be the subject of state violence, for our stories to not be reduced to a trial. Reform isn't an isolated revolution. It requires us to have a profound reckoning with our past if we want a shot at building a more just and equitable future. If we do not change what we do and how we do it, it becomes who we are. That will be our legacy. So do we want to stick to convictions of potentially innocent people because we prioritize finality over justice? Are we satisfied with the status quo where men like Kyle Rittenhouse are considered victims and men like Daunte Wright are considered criminals? Do we want to accept a society where the same day George Floyd's life was vindicated, Ma'Khia Bryant's life was taken by another police officer? And of course, in the middle of the trial, Daunte Wright was murdered 10 miles from the courthouse. In the book To Kill a Mockingbird, Harper Lee noted that people generally see what they look for and hear what they listen for. So what are we looking for? Are we looking for someone to blame? Are we looking to reinforce a narrative that everyone has the same choices, the same opportunities, that everyone's treated the same in the eyes of the law? What if instead of looking for someone to blame, we started looking for something to change? What if instead of putting Band-Aids on problems, we actually looked into the root causes of the wound? Wouldn't that stop the bleeding? What if instead of investing in prisons, policing, and surveillance more and more, we instead invested more money into education, more money into intervention, more money into community partnerships? Wouldn't that lead to safer, healthier, and more thriving communities? Accountability does not always equal incarceration. Wealth should never dictate liberty, and treatment should not always be subordinate to punishment. This is not just some theoretical policy shift. We've done this in Suffolk County, and it works. We know tough on crime policies are relics of the past, and smart on crime policies are the way to a more equitable future. We know this because the data backs it up. A recent study in the National Bureau of Economic Research confirms that by not prosecuting low-level misdemeanors, we actually decrease the likelihood of that potential defendant's involvement in the criminal legal system. Reducing the prosecution of nonviolent misdemeanors reduces racial disparities, recidivism, and the likelihood that the misdemeanor ends in murder. This policy change is the difference between life and death. It could have made the difference for George Floyd, for Eric Gardner, for Daunte Wright, each of whom was killed because of a misdemeanor. Our mission should always be about people, not crime. Until we embrace that fundamental shift in our way of thinking, we will continue to fail the people we took an oath to protect. Change happens when people demand it. Some things have changed in the last several years, but progress is not an end result, it's an evolution. And although we have made progress, we absolutely still have a tremendous amount of work to do. It's true that people in positions of power like me are finally starting to look more and more like the communities that they were elected to serve. It is also true that there's no place in our country where Black and brown people are more represented than in our carceral facilities. We must work for a system that is just for all and not just those with wealth, power, and privilege. It is also true that the criminal justice reform is now viewed as a bipartisan goal. And yet we have failed to meaningfully address mass incarceration with the urgency it deserves. We must pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. It's true that change is possible, and it is also true that change is very difficult. That's because change makes people uncomfortable. And when people are uncomfortable out of fear or out of a need to retain power, which remember, power is never given, it's usually taken, they grasp onto myths that reinforce the status quo. Critics claim that progressive prosecutors prioritize defendants over victims. Not only is that inaccurate, it is offensive. Here's the truth. Today's victim can be tomorrow's defendant and was likely yesterday's witness. Anyone who does not understand that doesn't understand the cyclical nature of the criminal legal system in certain communities. We must realize that every person should be treated with dignity, not only because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the smart thing to do. If we treat you terribly when you're a defendant and then want to be nice to you and ask you to come forward when you witness a crime, we're the same government and police that were treating you terribly in the first place. We always have to think about the victims of violent crimes. That's why I hired a licensed independent clinical social worker as the chief of our victim witness advocate program. It's why we invest in developing restorative justice programs. It's why we celebrate the resilience of survivors and partners of survivors and work with organizations that can provide the care and support people need after unimaginable trauma. Critics also claim that we are prioritizing reform over public safety. They advocate for a zero-sum game, creating false binaries which pit efficiency against fairness, safety against justice, and supposed heroes against alleged victims. But make no mistake, this is not a battle between safety and justice. It's a battle between two competing visions of what public safety is. What is clear is that incarcerating vast numbers of people for minor offenses has not worked for certain communities. My policies may make people uncomfortable, but change never happens when we're comfortable. So people generally see what they look for and hear what they listen for. Look at our system. Confront its failures. Name its designed biases. And listen to those who have been impacted by it. They are our allies, not our enemies. People generally see what they look for and hear what they listen for. I promise you, I can see a better future, one where everyone's voice is heard. And I look forward to talking about that and hopefully building it together with you. Thank you.
I must say that it is refreshing to hear a prosecutor talk about issues related to procedural fairness, to the impact that misdemeanors have. In fact, I did a large part of my dissertation on that, and also worked in Alameda County and in New York County in Manhattan, dealing with the complexity of low-level offenses and how that has an impact on the community, how that has an impact on recidivism. So I'm grateful that you're speaking about this, and also about the issues related to this, addressing the systemic and structural issues that are present, particularly in how it impacts working class folks as well as people of color. So I just thank you. I was nodding incessantly, so I appreciate that. I want to kind of pivot a bit and ask you some questions related to Boston. And so Boston has a well-documented history of racial conflict, looking at the school busing riots, looking at the Stewart case, and the current Ellis case that's going on right now. What initiatives, and I know you did highlight a bit of that in your opening remarks, but if you could maybe just elaborate a little bit more in terms of how you envision some of your programs or practices, philosophies to promote inclusivity, racial and social justice. And then also more specifically, how does the Black Lives Matter movement influence the decisions you make within your department?
Yeah, so, I ran on a platform where, in 2018, I was going to try something different, right? Because I knew that the system was not working. And what I did was I put up 6 weeks before the primary election on September 4th, 2018, a list of 15 types of crimes that in the first instance, we were just going to flip the presumption from prosecuting you to declining, diverting, or dismissing your case. It is a rebuttable presumption. We can always go back to flinging you on a conveyor belt and shooting you down to Nashua Street or South Bay, which is where you go if you are arrested in Boston, Chelsea, Winthrop, or Revere. And I didn't want to trick anyone to voting in for me and then becoming some new person that they were like, who did I just vote for? And we won with 42% of the vote in a crowded 5-person primary. And then I won with over 80% of the vote in the general. And then I took office and I did what I said I was going to do. And everyone lost their proverbial minds, like in law enforcement and, the governor and the head of EOPS, the Executive Office of Public Safety. And I was just shocked because I'm like, why are you surprised that I'm being who I said I was going to be? So one of the few things that, I wanted to change because I am Boston, right? I was born here. And, I have a unique background in that my dad is second generation Irish American, South Boston, West Roxbury, Whiskey Point, and Brookline projects. And my mom is West Indian. And so I'm multicultural. And some of the first things we did was memorialize just the harm that had happened in our cultures in Boston, and particularly by the legal system, the judiciary, or the prosecutor's office. So when you mention busing, the police were deeply involved in that, right? When you mention Charles Stewart, which for those of you that don't know, is the man who shot and killed his pregnant wife on the ride back from a Lamaze class and drove through Mission Hill, which is in Roxbury, and falsely claimed that a Black man had tried to carjack them or kill them. Carol died almost immediately, and Christopher, their unborn child, was born and 17 days later died. The Boston Police Department came down in warlike force, rained down upon Mission Hill, invading it and brutally harming and scarring this community, all under the guises, of course, of doing the right thing, because it was a terrible, awful murder. Of course, Charles's story starts unraveling. He had killed his wife and child, and the coward he was jumped to his death. But the sort of newspaper publishings had vilified all of these Black people, in particular, Willie Bennett, who was never charged with the murder, but his face was blasted on the cover of the Herald, the Globe, and there were calls for the death penalty, right? And so what the Black community and what poor communities of any color and BIPOC communities know is you have no problem vilifying us on the cover of a newspaper, but the apology comes on page 17 in font 0, right, with invisible ink 7 months later. No. We never get the benefit of the apology. So that is all weighed on our shoulders, right? Busing is still, there are people, our mayor, Kim Janey, was bussed. She remembers racial slurs being screamed at her, rocks being thrown at her. These are scars and wounds that we still carry with us today as adults. And I feel like some of the policies I've put into place are attempting to not only sort of speak out about those experiences, but also root out the sort of systemic harm that comes from them. And then lastly, I think what Black Lives Matter has done, whether you agree with Black Lives Matter or not, is just masterfully taken away the media's voice. And remember, our media does not reflect the community, right? Like, or if any of you have seen me on TV, it's usually because there was a homicide somewhere. You don't see me when I'm going to schools in Roxbury and encouraging kids or congratulating them because they got on the honor roll. I do that all the time. You don't see me on the news in the fort in Roxbury, which is one of the most beautiful places in Boston, when there's a jazz festival and nobody's shot and nobody's killed. The media doesn't care about that. They want to come when there's a shooting, right? Because that reinforces the narrative. So I think what Black Lives Matter has done masterfully is taken away the media's sort of lens, which is overwhelmingly majority based, right? White, not diverse, and skewed, and started their own narrative and exposed things that certain communities knew were happening all the time, and other communities are now just waking up to realizing.
Just a quick follow-up with the 15 crimes that you are either decriminalizing or not charging. Has there been any data, or I know that you mentioned that there's been a decrease, but has there been any data that you've found in your department in terms of how this has impacted public safety, or could you just elaborate a little bit more on that?
For sure. So one of the reasons I think that I actually won is because I realized very quickly, more than the other candidates, that it's a job, right? Like running for office is a job where every day it's like Groundhog Day. You have an interview with every single person you meet when you're running, and who has the best sort of story and who understands the job. So a lot of people think I'm a really good lawyer and I've tried cases, I can be the DA. Well, the DA doesn't try cases. The DA sets policy and runs an office of 350 people, which are some of the most polar opposite people in the world, right? We have police, we have Mass State Police, Transit Police, Boston Police, Chelsea, Winthrop, Revere Police. We have lawyers, we have investigators, we have all these different things. So what I did was I understood the job, and then I spoke with every single entity that touches the criminal legal system and said to them, if you had a magic wand and could change the system, what would you do? And to the person, judges, police, prosecutors, defense attorneys, people behind bars, we are clogging up the system with too many of these nonviolent, non-serious things where overwhelmingly, guys, if you ever have time and want to come to the Boston Municipal Court or any of the 8 divisions of the Boston Municipal Court or Chelsea District Court, if you come in, you don't need to be a psychiatrist or a psychologist. I promise you, overwhelmingly, well more than 60% of the people have a mental health disorder, substance use disorder, or are suffering from food or housing insecurity. High 60%. There are some very serious crimes in Suffolk County that are also in our municipal and district court, and they have to be held accountable, because even if you have a mental health issue or a substance use disorder and you have a gun or you stabbed somebody or punched them or did something like that, we have to hold you accountable for that. I just want to hold you accountable in a facility where you can get treatment too, right? It does not have to be a carceral facility, but whether it's Bridgewater Hospital that you go to. But again, so I think when I think about those 15 crimes, that's what I was thinking about. It's not a sort of get out of jail free card. It's a, let's have some of these other systems stand up and do some damn work around here, right? Why is the criminal legal system the last catch basin at the end of all of these systemic failures? Education, environment, not having a living wage, not having health insurance or a good healthcare facility, all of these things, mental health not being looked at or cared for. Those are the things that are failing people. And then they come to me and we put them in jail. And what happens, unfortunately, Mia, is that if you come out more mentally ill, more violent, and less employable, we have failed in every single way. And guys, it costs us $55,000 a year to send you to South Bay, the Suffolk County House of Corrections. I just want to use that money to get beds for people that are, need treatment, right? Or counseling. Like, I read an article a couple months ago where there are psychiatrists and psychologists now that don't even take health insurance. They only are paid in cash because they don't want to deal with that system. Okay, so now only rich people are mentally ill? Like, what is going on? And so we don't have systems, and rich people are mentally ill, a lot of them, but we are too, the poor people, right? We need services and treatment, and that's what isn't happening there. So those 15 crimes were just an opportunity for me to sort of try a social experiment to see how this would work. So what's good is crime did not increase, those categories of crimes. And then just recently, the National Bureau of Economic Research published a study that we talked about that showed when people first come into contact, these are nonviolent, non-serious crimes. I'm not talking about rapes, murders, armed assault no, I'm talking about trespass or driving with a suspended license. If we push them away after they've encountered the police, which of course is before me, right? You get pulled over, your sticker is expired, they, give you a summons or maybe arrest you, and then you get released on personal recognizance. The DA doesn't know about any of that. That's all the police that's happening in front of. I find out about it when you show up at court. And if I look at it and say, all right, Julia hasn't done anything like this before, we're going to null process it. Can you please get your license? It's called the RMV. Goodbye, Julia. Julia doesn't come back into contact with the system at a significant rate. But if we do loop her in, sadly, there are all these other ropes that she can trip over in the sense of you're late. And it's random, right? If you're in front of Judge Mia and you're supposed to be there at 9 and it's 9:01, Judge Mia might say default. If you're in front of Judge Rollins, who doesn't even come out, starts at 9, I don't even come out until 11. You're sitting there, there's all these other collateral consequences of what's happening, right? You have to get babysitting, if the tea isn't running right. There are all these things that people end up tripping over, right? You're a couple minutes late because the tea's down. You can't pay your fines or fees because, of course, our criminal legal system is funded on the back of poor people, right? So there's all these things that happen that I tried to kind of remove with this social experiment. And what's great is the data has borne out that looking back 17 years, 30%, because there were still 40 murders, and those 40 families are irreparably changed, right? Or harmed. So both of the things can be true, right? We can look at the data and say that it's working, but we can also be decent and not only look at the data. We can say, but we realize there are pain points here. How do we need to be better in these areas, right? How do we need to get down to, Mass Ave and Melnia Cass not shouldering the burden of the opioid crisis and substance abuse for the entire goddamn Commonwealth of Massachusetts, excuse my language, right? So why aren't we having other cities and towns shoulder some of this? And, I live this. I have a sibling that is actively in recovery. I'm the guardian of nieces because of mental health and substance use issues. There are collateral consequences, and we need to think differently about how we're looking at these problems.
I could talk to you all day. I could talk to you, but there's so many questions, but okay. I'm going to I'm going to ask one quick short question, and then I'm going to hand this off to Zahara, because I think really ultimately, it is really about how our students are engaging with you. But I do have one particular question related to police misconduct. So given the ongoing conflict between African American community and the police, what do you see as your position? So specifically in terms of your role in monitoring, addressing, and holding accountable cases of police misconduct in Suffolk County, also including consideration of any kind of databases related to misconduct cases that the public can have access to.
Sure. So what's really interesting, guys, remember, in 95% of the cases, the prosecutor and the police walk in hand, and the police are our key witnesses, right? So if it's the Commonwealth versus Rachel Rollins, usually there might be some other lay witnesses that were there, when I did what I did, right? But there's also a police officer that's usually, or two or more, that are going to testify about it, or we've been working with them building this case. If it's a serious case, we presented to the grand jury and it's been indicted up to Superior Court. But understand, in the majority of the times, we are aligned. Where the tension comes in is when the police engage in misconduct, right? Because then the very DA's office that 95% of the time is like skipping and holding hands into court with the police, the community is supposed to now believe that I'm going to say like, wait, I know I went to Jill's baby shower and we've tried 30 cases together, but Jill just discharged her weapon. I promise you, I'm not biased. I'll be able to look into this and see whether she used excessive force, right? No, like they think we're all, it is incestuous that they look at these relationships. So one of the big things I did, and it's the first in the nation that we've done this, is whenever there's an officer involved shooting, discharge, meaning like, taser or rubber bullets or something like that. Or I would even say discharge of their duty, right? So look at Derek Chauvin. He didn't use a weapon, but his knee was a weapon, right? So, a gun wasn't used, but a murder still happened, or any allegation of excessive force. I have taken that out of the DA's office. Now the DA I still have control of it, but I have 4 outside people. I have a community member, I have a criminal defense attorney, I have a retired judge, and I have an active member of law enforcement, and I'm the 5th member. We don't even meet in my office. We meet at an outside law firm. We are presented the case, and then we walk through everything. So that's police misconduct. What I think I've done, Mia, is I've been very honest, right? I've said to the police, and I said it if you've seen trial 4, if you are doing your job well, aren't racist, aren't xenophobic or like hate everybody, and just want to do your job and you're culturally competent and you aren't using excessive force, we'll get along incredibly well. You'll do your job, I'll do mine. But if you are, and we've seen this in the news recently, raping people, getting OUIs, raging and punching your wife, girlfriend, partner, whomever, I'm going to hold you accountable. And then I'm going to ask that I can't fire you from the police department, but I can say you aren't going to testify in any of my cases moving forward, which is overtime. So that's our law enforcement automatic discovery database, the LEAD database. So we put them in there. We're making that public to the criminal defense bar, and we are holding the police accountable. And what I found very funny is I met with all of the chiefs and colonels and commissioners of my police departments to tell them before we did it. And they were outraged that they could be put into a database and that they wouldn't even know about it, which is ironic because that's what the gang database is, right? Like that they use all the time.
What does the union say about that?
And so I met with the union as well. And here's the best part, Mia. Management and the union have a relationship with each other. I'm not a member of their collective bargaining agreement, right? So, but I did pay the respect, and many people don't, is they just meet with the commissioner of the Boston Police Department. But there's one commissioner, there's 4 presidents of the 4 unions in the Boston Police Department. We have now set up quarterly meetings with the union leadership. And I've also appeared because, I like to say I am never scared, right? But I've appeared before the Boston Police Patrolmen's Association. I believe in what I'm saying. This isn't, I'm not fearless. I'm just confident because we've done our research, and I have no problem pushing back, but also hearing from them because they have lived experiences too that are important to listen. But I think the Integrity Review Bureau has been hard for them because it's the lead database, and it's also our conviction integrity and sentencing integrity, where we look backwards to make sure we got it right. And there's this feeling, I think, with law enforcement that's really fascinating to me, including prosecutors, where we believe we are the only profession on the planet Earth that has a 0% error rate or fail rate. We never make a mistake, ever, right? So it's like, are you kidding me? Of course we make mistakes, but they don't ever want to admit it because they feel like we feel like we'll lose some ground. I believe we'll gain ground, actually, when people look at us and say, like, okay, now you're not just lying, right? Or insulting me by saying nothing went wrong here. And that to me is the Sean Ellis case. That to me is why I personally wrote a letter on my letterhead as the district attorney to Willie Bennett's family, and said, although I was not the DA back then, that did not correct the media when they said that you were responsible for the murder of Carol and Christopher DeMady, not Stewart. And, I wrote him a letter on our letterhead saying, but I hope this apology is a small token toward your long process of healing, right? There are things we can do, and that's sort of more in the spirit of a kind of Truth, Justice, and Reconciliation Commission, right? Of acknowledging that apologies and even sitting and listening to people's experiences are really meaningful.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Zahara. I want to congratulate Zahara on graduating, and also just the wonderful welcome that you provided to District Attorney Rollins. So I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing to hear you speak so far,
Rachel.
I'm just so passionate about all of the things that you've been talking about, from mass incarceration to the importance of policy change for misdemeanors and nonviolent serious crimes. We do have a few questions that have been submitted by the audience prior to the event. So thank you to everyone who submitted a question. We'll try to get to as many as we can in the next couple minutes. So the first question I want to ask is, what, if any, restorative justice approaches are being used by the DA's office at this time?
So we do circles all the time in schools. They're starting to use those with respect to disputes between, either students themselves or teachers or community. We had a situation, sadly, the officer has been fired, where there was an incident very shortly after I took office where a Boston police officer is alleged to have used racial slurs against a group of middle schoolers that were walking to school in the morning. We did not have the officer involved at all, but I called Commissioner Gross at the time and said, we are going to speak to these students and we are going to apologize for the experience that they had, and then engaged in some circles with some of the students later on. We do it all the time. I've been involved personally in circles with people at MCI Norfolk. So individuals that are serving life without the possibility of parole, as a prosecutor myself, and them as individuals that have taken somebody's life and taken responsibility for that, and hearing just about the experiences that they've had, I think is important. And then we, remember, the important part about restorative justice, whether you believe in it or not, is you need a victim that is open to it and a person who is engaged in the harm that is open to taking responsibility. You can never drag somebody to restorative justice, right? Other times we've seen situations where a circumstance could have happened in a community, and I would offer to go and explain the investigation, why we chose to move forward with the prosecution or why we didn't. I think things like that are very, very important. And I think it is a tremendous, tremendous skill and tool.
Yes, thank you. Another question that I have is, what are some of the challenges that you've had to overcome as the first Black woman elected as DA?
So what was interesting is, let's start, running for office is really hard, right? And like, depending on what you're running for, it's hard. I don't care whether it's, you know, school committee. I don't care whether it's Boston City Council at large or a smaller district, state rep, state senator, US congressperson. You know, obviously the bigger the sort of geographic footprint, it gets a little more daunting, but it's still really, really hard. And I chose to do it at 47 years old, right? Like, so there was something really, I felt really vulnerable, right? Because it's not like I'm selling pies, right? Or like widgets where, you know, if you don't like my pie, okay, you know, I still am a mom, you know, I'm still myself, right? There are other things about me. It just felt like this was so much a part of me that if people didn't buy it, like that, I felt personally about that, right? Not in an angry way, but just like very vulnerable, putting yourself out there for something you believe in and seeing whether you would work. And I vividly recall the night, September 4th, when I came back after leaving at 7 a.m. to make 33 different stops that day. And I said, don't call me. I don't care if the polls start coming in and it looks like we've received 1 vote total, or if it's a landslide, don't call me, because I don't want my attitude to change. And I remember walking in and my campaign manager was weeping, but she had like mascara coming down her face, like the spooky person, right? And I thought, oh my God, we got like 4 votes, right? And of course we had gotten more than that, but it was really, I think the personal challenge of putting yourself out there is one big thing. And then, you know, it's lonely. Like I get it when people think of me, they think like I'm fearless and whatever. I am but sometimes I'm like, this sucks, right? Like, why am I doing this and not working at a major law firm? Like all of my legal friends who you're deciding which company should get how many millions of dollars. Like, yeah, I could be making 5 probably times more money than I'm making now. But I swear to God, this is our civil rights movement. I feel like when I do something that I know to my bone marrow is right, I want to be able to come home at night and look in the mirror and be proud of who I am and be creating a world where my daughter and my nieces feel proud of me and are valued just as much of the rest of us. And like, I just need to remember, I am not pulling your ceiling down to my floor. I am lifting the floor up to your ceiling, right? Like, so these, you know, this sort of feeling like, but you're taking all the pie. There's enough pie for everyone, right? Like, stop hoarding all the goddamn pie. We have enough for everyone to get a piece. So again, I think, I know I'm like, well, what were we talking about? No, I'm just joking. But I think it's really important that we sort of talk about with challenges, that piece of like, you know, recognizing that it's hard, recognizing that I am seeing people often on the worst day of their lives. And certainly for murders, certainly for rape or sexual assault, but also, guys, it's not fun when you get arrested for an OUI. It's not, I mean, it's just, it's negative, right? And it's tense. And I think it's important to try to show kind of compassion. But those are some of the challenges that I feel. And then, you know, in the beginning, sort of doubting myself a little bit. I don't do that anymore. Like, I don't do it. I won't allow that to happen. And, you know, I want to believe fully in myself and my ability to do this job well, because I am guided with like what I know is right and just and equitable and true.
Yes, absolutely. I 100% agree with you. And I second your statement of this is our time for our civil rights movement. So I do want to be aware of time. I think that that's all the questions that we have time for. But I want to thank you so much for sharing with us. You have given me so much to think about. And I want to thank you for your time and for your service to the Suffolk County. Dr. Ortiz, is there anything that you would like to say before we wrap up?
Sure. First of all, it's been a pleasure. It's been very refreshing to hear your point of view and how you see justice. This is definitely a critical point in our history. We have seen this before, related to police-involved shootings, concerns about issues of injustice. And I think, we're all kind of collectively looking towards you, in terms of how you are going to either mandate that or maintain that or address those kind of structural systemic issues that are within the criminal justice system. So we are just pleased that you've been able to share this with us. And
Absolutely. And last, on an upbeat note,
yes,
the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, just announced that he's going to be looking into this police department, right? That is a significant shift from prior administration. So I believe there is light. I believe there is light coming, but we have to be vigilant. We cannot let up. So very honored to speak to you guys. Keep up the fight.
Great.
Okay, great. And with that, we will pass it to Dr. Mary Grant, who will give some closing remarks.
Great, thank you. And Mia, Zahara, thank you so much for leading a brilliant conversation. DA Rollins, thrilled to have had you with us, and I think you've recruited a whole lot of folks who want to make some more pie and some good trouble along the way. So thank you all for coming to be part of this important conversation, this inspiring conversation. And we're just so grateful, DA Rollins, that you put yourself out there, that you ran for office, that you are not only an inspiration, but a role model. And we're just so grateful for the work that you're doing to change systems and build more equitable communities. Zahara, Mia, thank you. To the team behind this, thank you. To our partners in criminal studies and African American studies minor, thank you. And to all of you, be well, be safe, and thank you for joining us today. Take good care.